Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and something awesome happened. You see, there was a mod back in the day known as Yin-Yin the Sea Dragon, which unfortunately got removed from the workshop. I believe it was due to a case of Free Kingdom's assets being used and so on, which is a bit of a no-no with the EULA for the mods. Now the mod itself was really fun and genuinely missed by the community, but thankfully it's now back and it's had a few changes. There's also a submod which adds a little bit more flavor to it, so what we're going to do here is, well, check it out. So, first up, let's go with the faction effects. Has access to unique landmarks in the province capitals around Lustria. There's actually a few of them. Campaign movement range plus 8% for all armies. Melee damage plus 15% for Dragon Fleet Marines. Incomes from port plus 10%, this would be a faction-wide thing. And diplomatic relations minus 60 with the Dark Elves and the Lizardmen. This is going to be taking part of a lore thing that actually happened, by the way. The Sea Dragon originally invaded Lustria and, yeah, it didn't go too well. So this is kind of like Invasion 2.0, which in the future, if we actually do get Yin-Yin as a character officially, I imagine it's going to go through the same thing. Now, for the Lord effects, we have the following. Campaign movement, disabled when recruiting. Has access to shipbuilding. Leadership plus 6 when in foreign territory for Lord's Army. Charge bonus plus 10 in Lord's Army. And finally, harmony plus 3 for Yin. So this faction, like the previous mod, is going to focus on two locations. You're going to actually have a start in Lustria with Yin-Yin herself, but in Cathay you will also have a presence there with a rather large army, which you'll be fighting against a bunch of different Nipponese pirates. Yes, some Nippon units are going to be there. You're going to have the full area of Mount Lee also, which means that you're going to be able to build that up, but the thing is, how it's going to work with this campaign is you're going to be fighting in one side, in another side. Sometimes it's better just to abandon one and then continue with the other, unless you feel fairly confident. This also will depend on your difficulty settings. Like everything I'm showcasing right now is going to be an easy because it's a showcase video, but my personal campaign I was playing on legendary very hard battles and it was a bit of a struggle. However, you will have a little bit of benefit to this because you'll have the normal victory conditions. This is just to boost up your heroes and so on. However, you'll also have a extra. These are two mission style ones which will give you some extra benefits, you know, just better recruitment capacity and so on. So this will make it a little bit easier for you to field some armies, which is going to be quite beneficial when you're dealing with so many enemies coming at you. Yin-Yin herself is a quite powerful character, as you can expect. She is a Cathayan dragon after all, and she's got a mix of a Cathayan lore but also some spells from the Lore of the Deeps, which kind of adds in a little bit more flavor. She's also quite good at getting her ports to be even more beneficial and lucrative, especially with trade incomes too. This is a faction that at the beginning you're going to struggle for cash, but as you progress, she's going to get much and much stronger. You've got a lot of buffs towards your own personal army, especially when fighting at sea, but economically you're going to be quite the powerhouse. I think you might even be the strongest one economically out of the 3 playable factions. I am counting the 2 other Cathayan dragons here after all, but yeah, honestly she's quite good for that. She's quite strong in melee. Her dragon form is really unique now compared to the original that we saw when this mod was originally released, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. What we do have to talk about is the fact that she's got shipbuilding. So yes, she is a pseudo horde, just like, say, for example, the Vampire Coast characters. This is a mechanic I'd love to see more implemented into the game, either with mods or officially, as it does work with certain characters. It's not a very big ship itself, but it has everything that you'll need, including a bunch of units to make sure that you can keep mobile and you can keep aggressive, which in Lustria, yeah, you're going to need that. Believe me, it's not a fun place to be if you can't recruit some troops, because you're going to get dogpiled by a lot of Lizardmen factions and then pretty much everything else there quite quickly. So the campaign itself plays very similar to what you already had in the original mod. You're going to have to fight your way through Lustria, or you can start solidifying yourself in Cathay. You can do both, but it's not going to be easy. And yeah, it's pretty fun. It adds a lot more to it, especially as you start dealing with the Jade pirates, who will be quite populous around that region. And there's also those kaiju, which, yes, there are some giant sea monsters, which, as far as I know, only just recruit one unit themselves, but they are quite dangerous, and they will be aggressive to you. They will start launching multiple attacks at you whenever possible, and it is pretty interesting, actually, because it does give you another threat. If you're defending the Cathayan territories, you're going to be dealing with a lot of pirates being very aggressive to you, and then also these kaiju coming at you, so you've got to plan how you're going to build. Will you consolidate some area and then get back to it? Because you're basically dealing with two factions from the very start, and eventually, obviously, we will have to deal with Clan Eshin, you will have to deal with Lokia Fellheart. It's very dangerous in both locations. As for Lustria itself, it's pretty straightforward. Knock the first Lizardmen faction out and start preparing yourself, because, yeah, Gorok and the others are going to come for you, and it's going to be quite the hectic campaign. I think this is why I like this mod so much. It allowed for just a little bit of insanity, which was pretty cool. It's important to note that the Jade Sea Pirates, the Nepalese faction, which you can play with a submod, we'll cover that a little bit later, is quite difficult. Obviously in easy, it's going to show as quite an easy auto-resolve, but if you want to fight these, you're going to be fighting with a lot of enemies, and then a kaiju is also there, which is kind of funny. It's quite a strong one too, I must say. It's probably one of the most dangerous ones that I've dealt with. But it's one of these things where you're going to feel like you're constantly under threat, and I think that adds in a little bit more fun to Grand Cathay. Little notice that I can get a little framey here for some reason, but these are the kaijus, and you can tell that their stats are horrendously strong. These are the ones that are going to be threatening you fairly often, and yeah, you know, having some anti-large is going to be very useful here, because they are really, really scary. I do like the look of them. I think they're kind of cool. Obviously, as far as I know, these are not low-friendly, but at the end of the day, it just adds a little bit of an element for fun, and that kind of works here. Really, it does, because, yeah, it's kind of cool. So the roster itself might seem a little bit big, but you don't actually get access to everything. Some of these units are part of the Nepalese faction that will be fighting you, but there's a decent amount of stuff. It adds in a little bit of flavor that you'll be able to use, a lot of gunpowder and so on, which is going to be helpful considering that you're dealing with basically Jurassic Park. And there is quite a lot there, so we're going to start talking about the units that you'll be able to use with the Cathayan faction in no particular order, and this is the first unit itself. These are the Ansatsusha. I am going to be butchering these names horrendously, by the way, but this is basically an assassin type unit. They've got a little bit of range there. They're able to do a lot of good damage on melee. They're quite fast to move around too. These are really, really good, especially if you're fighting in the jungles of Lustria, or if you're dealing with, well, pretty much anything that's being thrown at you. I really do like this unit. They look cool too, which is a big thing, especially with this mod. Everything that's been added in here is just freaking awesome looking. Another unit is the Dragon Fleet Marines, and these are some decent shooters, to be honest. Also quite decent in melee. So a hybrid unit, which, to be honest, Grand Cathay could have used a little bit in vanilla. Hopefully in the future we will get some. But yeah, you want these guys because they can really pack a punch, especially against any big boys that you're going to be dealing with. Then we got the Jade Sea Pirates. These are close quarters infantry. They actually have access to a little bit of shooting too, which is quite good. They look phenomenal. I love the whole thing with the banners in the back. One of my biggest hopes and dreams in the Total War series is eventually we'll get a DLC which will just add in all the missing command units. But until then, you know, we've got these units. There's actually a few more of these pirates, but they're not available to you. They're available to the Nipponese faction. But yeah, you know, these are just your militia troops, essentially. And hybrid units like this are fairly good, especially when you start boosting them up. Going for a bit of a higher tier is the Sea Dragons Hatamoto, and yeah, these units look so cool. I absolutely love the look of them. Obviously, they're a frontline trooper. They're able to do a lot of damage. They're anti-infantry. Yeah, I mean, just look at them. This is the main thing for me. Just the visual of the unit is something which I think we've all envisioned for Nipponese types units, and you never know in the future if CA and GW end up creating it, but until then, we've got some cool looking mods that add them in anyway. Now, if we start looking towards the Yichar Jungle Fighters, these ones are quite cool, because obviously it's a hybrid unit, which is a mobile type archer. They've got Vanguard, but they've also got Glaives, so they're able to do some really good damage up front. Obviously, they're not the best for that. You want to use them with their poison attacks to be able to get around the enemy, shoot them. use them as a skirmish troop, honestly, more than anything. And they're great. It's multi-purpose, 160 range is really some of the best range that you're going to get with Grand Cathay. Plus, poison attacks are always quite useful. Now, we do have Ogre Whalers too, which look phenomenal. Again, I'm loving the look of this. The Ogre Whalers are basically lead belchers, but usable for Grand Cathay. They're anti-large. You can use them in the areas of water and so on because they are aquatic. They are pretty cool, honestly. And definitely, if you're going to be inside Lustria, if you're going to be trying to take over Lustria, this might be a unit that you're going to rely on quite heavily, as having a bit of anti-large, especially in range form, is going to be quite good for you. And finally, we have the Golden Heron, which is available to Yin-Yin herself. This is something that you'll be able to summon in, and you'll also be able to upgrade to. You'll have a option to pick one or the other, so it's pretty much depending on what your playstyle is. But I mean, this is one of the most visually impressive things I've ever seen. Obviously, it's kind of like the Cathayan version of the Thunder Barge. It's extremely powerful, and it's just so pretty. I know, pretty isn't important, but when you have something visually impressive on the battlefield, it always kind of makes it look a little cooler, and it just immerses you a little bit more. I'm a big fan of this. It's highly destructive, by the way. The fact that you can summon it in basically means that your 20 stack is also a 21 stack. And then obviously we have to talk about Yin-Yin herself, who I imagine must be difficult to kind of create, as obviously we don't know what these characters actually look like. There's no art in them. This is the thing. But she looks very, very cool, obviously, and she looks even better when we go into her dragon form. You get a nice little animation of the whole water and stuff, and she uses mealworm assets, which I think is really, really cool. The idea is it's to make her as unique as possible. And this is really, really cool. My hope in the future is that all the dragons that we do get officially, I'm imagining that even Yin-Yin will become a DLC character or FLC character in the future, but I'm imagining that they'll look like this good, or at least that's the hope. When it comes to playing as the Cathayan faction, you'll also have to deal with a bunch of unique dinosaurs. Loads of feathered friends, which is kind of cool, honestly. They look absolutely phenomenal, which I know I've said a few times, but this is kind of, this is the historic way on how dinosaurs actually looked. They're not supposed to be just all scales and so on. Obviously, Warhammer is a bit different, but you can really appreciate it, and when it looks cool, it just generally looks cool. So in terms of Yin-Yin's faction, we're going to talk about this once a battle plays out, which is going to be quite fast, considering that I'm using all the modded troops, and the Lizardman faction that I'm fighting doesn't really have a good army. It's just showcasing some of the new and unique enemies that you'll be fighting against. But yeah, the Yin-Yin faction is really fun, I must say. It's very hectic. The harder difficulties make it a lot harder to be able to focus on both areas. You can manage it if you know how to micro quite well. You will have to lose some good high tier units too, which is a bit of a shame, because obviously you do have that one army that's meeting the pirates, which is quite decent, but money is going to be very difficult. You're getting attacked from multiple sides. You're dealing with so many enemies, which I find to be one of the most aggressive campaigns, I think, where you have to be defensive but also aggressive. It definitely adds in a lot more difficulty, which I know a lot more people were asking for, and I know a lot of people wanted. So yeah, this is something that if you're still waiting for new factions, if you're kind of burnt out with the Chaos Dwarfs and so on, again, faction mods keep this game alive once we enter small droughts. I'm not saying that we're going into a big drought like we were originally with Game 3, but it's the case of we're waiting until summer. Summer's just started, but I wouldn't imagine that the next DLC is going to happen until August, right? So this is going to be stuff that is going to keep you busy, and it's so well stylized. The units look fantastic. Yin-Yin looks great. The faction is well balanced from what I've seen, especially since you're dealing with so many enemies. All those units will be buffed up by the tech tree without a problem. I've been checking that. I think the red skills also do that too. It's most of the cases where most of the mods do that. Some mods in the workshop unfortunately don't. But yeah, you have a lot to play around with. And most importantly, it's going to give you a completely different Cathayan campaign, as both Zhao Ming and Meow Meow, yeah, they're fun characters, but they're both inside Grand Cathay, which while they're at different points of the country, they're still very much together, so you're still getting the same campaign. Variety is obviously the spice of life, and I think having Cathayan characters inside Cathay, but also outside too, just gives you a reason to have some replayability to it. But that's not all, because with a submod, which is attached to this, you can find it in the description below, by the way, you can play as the Jade Sea Pirates. Now, I would say that this is kind of work in progress. There could be a few things to make it more unique. However, there's a lot of fun stuff. So let's talk about some faction and lord effects, because yes, you do get some. So, faction effects first. Income from raiding plus 25%. Pirate crew growth plus 1% for all armies faction-wide. Income from ports plus 10%, and global recruitment capacity plus 2. For the lord effects, which it's not really a legendary lord, but it is a unique looking character, we have the following. Campaign movement disabled when recruiting, has access to shipbuilding, pirate crew growth plus 1 for Lord's Army, reload type reduction plus 6% for Lord's Army, and charge bonus plus 10 for Lord's Army. You're going to be quite an aggressive faction here. So if you play with this faction, Yin-Yin will actually be a little bit stronger, which will lead to a more interesting campaign for you, as you will not be fighting off the Yin-Yin faction at the very beginning. Instead, you will notice a lot of the kaijus around the area, so you want to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. You will have the whole Jade Delta River, by the way, and an army there with the Vampire Coast, because this is a Vampire Coast faction, so you'll already talk about that in a little bit, and you'll be fighting with Lokir at the very beginning too, so yeah, already a little bit of damage on all sides. Now, you can fully go Nepalese if you want to, which means that you won't have all the Vampire Coast stuff, you can just ignore it, and it works out quite well, to be honest. The way this mod works is that it does become a fairly hard campaign. Obviously, Lokir is very terrifying. You can take him out very early on if you just recruit a bunch of units with raised dead mechanic, but if you're just going to go full Nippon, yeah, that's not going to be a thing. You can go hybrid. I'm not sure if this was intentional by the modder, because fun fact, there was very, very old, like, Vault-style lore, which said that Nippon did have a rising vampiric community, which were also kind of pirate stuff. There was also going to be some, like, Nipponese vampires, but those never got released. A lot of stuff that was actually planned for Nippon back in the early days of Warhammer Fantasy just never got released, unfortunately. So this character kind of counts as your legendary lord. She is the pirate queen, but she doesn't really have a unique skill line. She's very much like a Cathay melee character, but in all honesty, she's fine, and I imagine that this mod in the future, if it does get updates, this is the sub-mod, of course, could be enhanced. You never know if the original mod of the Sea Dragon one changes stuff around. This is basically just playing hard mode, which I think is kind of cool. And honestly, like, the Nepalese stuff is just awesome. It's something that we all want. We all want Nippon. It would be cool to see that in the future, obviously, but that's later down the line, I'd say. Maybe. Let's hope, right? But yeah, she's also got access to shipbuilding. There's a lot of Cathay units. There's also a bunch of Vampire Coast stuff, which mixing and matching kind of works too if you want to have a little bit of an edge. But again, I can stress that you are more than capable of just going full Nippon. You do have access to a bunch of different lord options. You've got the Lord Magistrate, and you do have the Vampire Fleet Admiral. This is why I think that the modder originally, when creating the lords and so on, might have been inspired by the Nippon stuff, the, like, little bit of lore that we have. It's like 5 or 6 sentences, because you can get them with the laws of magic too, and I think that's obviously quite helpful, because having some magic, especially in Warhammer, is quite good. Well, it's essential, really, more than anything else. You do have the standard lord variant too, which is melee focused, just like your pseudo legendary lord, I guess we can call it. And yeah, overall, pretty cool. I've been playing with this faction a little bit, and it's kind of fun. So the Nippon-style units that Yin-Yin uses can also be used by the Jade Sea Pirates too, which, you know, makes sense. A Nippon faction will be using Nepalese units. There's also a few other things that get added in. You can see that the units, or even the characters, they just all look freaking cool. And again, cool factor is a really big thing here. When it starts going into units, you will have access to, say, for example, the Jade Sea Pirates, and have some different variants of them. You're not going to have a full roster here. I think in total it's about 7 or 8 or something, so a very small faction. You might find yourself mixing up with the Vampire Coast units, as, yeah, you might need a little bit of help, but I would say that you're perfectly fine. Having all the different options for the Jade Sea Pirates is quite cool. You'll also have access to some looted cannons, and obviously some Jade Sea Ronin. Again, freaking awesome looking units. I can't stop complimenting this enough, because It's, again, one of those factions which many of us have been dying for the Total War series as soon as we got our first look at the Immortal Empires map, and unfortunately Nippon wasn't there. You never know, they could expand the map eventually because it's something that can happen. But until then, again, mods like this are bringing us a little bit of Nippon into what is already available. Obviously, I'm not going to showcase the full roster because at the end of the day, you know, we've already seen a lot of them in the previous part of this video. But it's definitely something that you guys are going to want to check out, especially if you want something new, if you want something hard mode. Both of these factions I can consider fairly hard to play with, especially the Nippon faction because... yeah, if you're going full Nippon, you're going to be lacking. You're not really going to have any heroes too, so it's going to make it a little bit of a challenge. You never know again in the future if this mod gets updated though. I'll leave you here with a battle between my Nipponese units, which I was staying quite still, waiting for them to come to me, and versus a Dark Elf faction with Rakaf, mostly because, yeah, this is going to be one of the hardest enemies that you're going to be dealing with. Not Rakaf himself, more Lokia, but I figured it'll be kind of cool just to have a little bit of variety, and those dinosaurs do kind of die quickly if they're not being supported by other stuff. Yeah, these mods can be found in the description below. You've got the standard one, which is Yin-Yin. Obviously, you'll need Mixus for that, the Unlocker, and then the Submod to play as this faction, which you'll need to go to the Vampire Coast section. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. And yeah, have fun with this. I'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.
Stone and steel!
Admiral! Moving! There must be order! The dragons chose me! We must overcome! Defenders of Cathay! Harmonious work! Defenders of Cathay! Thunder of cities! Spears! Wind and fire!
Zhang Yang's faithful!